So thank you everyone for coming and being with us today. And I'd really like to get into, if we can, to get into this sense of lightness, of joy, of freedom, of recognizing that the ideas that we have absorbed through through our culture, through race consciousness, as Dr. Holmes would say, from the collective consciousness, perhaps in Jungian psychology, and through this universal belief in the necessity of struggle. Now, I'd like to give you a visual, a picture. And I know you've seen the webcams on the news. They have the webcams at the eagle's nests in different locations, and you can actually watch the progress from day to day as the mama eagle builds the nest and as the eggs are laid. And one of the things that I read is that when they build the nest, they put thorns at the bottom of it, prickly thorns that are not pleasant to lay on or to walk on. But then they cover those thorns with soft leaves and feathers and things that makes them more comfortable. We'll get back to the thorns in a bit. So the mama eagle lays the egg. And I want you to think of that egg as the perfect environment for that little chick to grow. Right? It's just, when you crack an egg open, there's nothing solid to it. It's all kind of runny and it goes everywhere. So it needs something to hold it into place for a while. It needs protection. The shell is just strong enough to to protect that little chick while it's developing. But it's just thin enough that it still can get air to come through it when necessary. And by sitting on it, the mother can use her body temperature to regulate it. If it's too hot, she can pull some of the leaves and the feathers away to let it cool off a little bit. But it is the perfect environment. It is the perfect environment for that chick while it is developing. So it kind of grows from this little undefined runny mass of stuff, and it develops into a creature that we recognize as a small eagle. It has eyes, and it has nose, and it has feathers. And its whole world, everything that it knows, its whole world exists inside that shell. But there comes a time in its development where that which was good for it, that which was necessary for it, that which protected it for a time, that which helped it to grow, now is an obstacle to further development. If the chick were to stay inside the egg forever, it would die, because all of the food that was stored in the yolk of the egg has been used up. Something within that chick, something tells it it's time. It's time to break out of this prison. What used to protect you is now a prison. It is holding you back. You are stuck, and now you must be free. And nature even gave the birds a special tooth, an egg tooth. There's a special tooth that develops on their beak that serves the purpose of cracking the egg from the inside out, cracking the egg, so that this little eagle can escape the prison, right? The prison of what was previously protection, the prison of that which was previously necessary for its growth, but it has outgrown that need, and now it must let go. So we can watch, if we have the opportunity to watch the webcam footage, we can see the little hole start in the egg, and we can see it get bigger, and we can see the little head come out, and eventually this little chick steps forth from the shell. And it continues to develop. It continues to develop in the nest, but at a new stage, at a different stage. And it is still being provided for. It is still being cared for, you know. The parents take turns going off and gathering food and coming back, and the little ones know to throw their head back and open their mouths because now it's time to eat. Their whole world has changed. Their whole world has changed from that little isolated world inside the egg that they were stuck in. Now they have more freedom. Now they're in their nest. They're in the air. They can see the sunlight. And they are being guarded and guided and protected as life is quite naturally taking them through the next stage. And then there comes a time when they have to leave the nest. There comes a time when they must learn to fly. And this is where the thorns come in. The mama eagle starts to take that soft layer that she put over the thorns. She starts to drag that back. And it creates what Emerson might refer to as the divine discontent. Not so comfortable staying in that nest anymore. A little bit sticky down there. So maybe this moves them up to the edge of the nest where they can get ready to fly. And some of them they'll jump and they'll fly when it's time. They'll come back to the nest and fly some more. And others are still hesitant, not quite so sure about this, you know. They might move right up to the edge and look over, but they're not quite ready to go. So what happens is the mother eagle walks up behind them, and with her body, she pushes them off the edge. But she watches. Nature is still guiding and guarding and protecting them. And if the mother eagle senses that that little one really isn't ready to fly, her big wing scoops down and she grabs the little one as it's falling and she pulls it back into the nest. And she will do that. She will do that until the little one learns how to fly. Now I want you to think of the world that the eagle enters when it learns how to fly. And compare that to the world that they experienced when they were inside that egg. Totally different experience. This is what the eagle was made to do, to soar, to fly, to glide. It was necessary and appropriate for it to be in that egg for a while. But eventually the constraints of the egg, that which protected it, that which helped it get as far as it needed to get in that egg, was holding it back. Something within the eagle, something within the chick knew to break away. And then it was in a different kind of confinement. It was in the nest. Certainly different, and we would say more freedom, greater experience than it was experiencing while it was in the egg. But still it was confined. Still it was confined to that little nest. And then came another stage of development where it learned how to fly. What we're talking about today the title is Beyond Winning and Losing. And it relates to Rumi's famous quote. It says, beyond ideas of right doing and wrong doing, there is a field. I will meet you there. And what the idea is that we as beings having a human experience, we too go through phases of development, stages of development. And the things that were once appropriate for us, just like being inside the egg was appropriate for the eagle, things that were once appropriate for us in the development of our own consciousness, in the development of our societies, there comes a time where those things hold us back. Those things keep us stuck. And if we are to step into the fullness of the experience for which we were created, just like if the eagle is to soar, we must let go. We must completely let go. You know, once that little chick gets out of the egg, they don't carry it around with them. They don't keep it on their back and try to fly. They're done with it. See? Time to move on. Time to let it go. I don't know what happens to it. Just realize I don't know what happens to the shells. What do they do with them? But they're done with them. They're done with them. So what we want to do is we want to consider the phases of the development of human consciousness. We want to kind of think about where life is and ask ourselves, what am I ready to let go of now? What am I ready to let go of? Is there something that has perhaps helped me or helped society to move as far as it has, but now it's holding us back and it's time to go? And one of those things that exists in our society is this whole mindset and culture of competition, of winning and losing, of striving hard to be the best. Now, in the business world, and perhaps even in politics to some extent, you can see, if you look at history, that sometimes the very thing, the very traits, the characteristics of an individual that helped them to be successful, to help them rise as far as they could in their profession, later held them back. There came a time in their career where they needed to take a different approach. And they didn't understand that. See, they our egos are wonderful things. People tend to think that they got to the top because they're so darn smart. And if you don't believe it, ask them. They'll tell you. Right? There's something special about me. That's how I got here. And what happens is they get into a position where they need a totally different approach, a totally different skill set, a totally different way of thinking and behaving and believing. And they can't do it. They can't do it. And they tumble from grace. They tumble from grace. One example, back in the 70s, everybody was studying, in the business management classes, they were all studying a man named John Carlzone, I believe his name was. He was the head of Scandinavian Airways. And Scandinavian Airways was at the time a very poor airline. And he took over, and within a 5-year period of time, they went from worst in everything, on time, baggage claim, all that, all customer complaints, all the ways that they rate an airline. But they went from last to first. Great success story in business, great turnaround. He wrote a book about it, and we would buy the books and we would have workshops and we would kind of model our customer service efforts in different businesses on this model that worked for Scandinavian Airways. And what happened to this gentleman was he left. I guess he did what he came to do, and he left, and he went to another company that wasn't doing so well, and he was going to jump in there and he was going to turn it around. He was going to make another success story out of it. And he failed miserably. He wound up leaving the company. And it wasn't because he was a bad man. It was because he did not understand. this is my opinion, he did not understand that there comes a time when the things that got you where you are holding you back. I worked for a corporation. It was a very big corporation, had many departments, and the people who rose to the heads of each of those organizations were very competitive people, very strong people, strong-willed people, egotistical, arrogant at times. You know, that's what the culture believed was required to succeed. That's the kind of person you want to do in things. And the business world changed. And what was required in order to move to the next level of business was not competition. It was collaboration. So all of these individuals who rose to the top of their silos now had to cooperate with one another and collaborate with one another to produce something bigger and better than their individual silo could. And they couldn't do it. They couldn't do it. They knew how to compete. They knew how to win. They knew how to struggle. They knew how to get on top. But they didn't know how to collaborate. And the business failed. It's no longer in existence at this time. They went broke. So what I wanted to point out is we've been watching, as many of you may have, we've been watching the Olympics this week on TV, and everything is about the drama of competition, the drama of winning, the drama of the struggle, you know. How many gold medals do we have? How many world records were set? How many Olympic records were set? What kind of obstacles did the athlete have to overcome in order to get here? You know, they've got all these human interest stories that tell you about the personal tragedies that some of these athletes had to go through. You know, there's always a story about someone who, a dear family member passed away just before they were supposed to get on the plane to go to the Olympics. And sure enough, they decided that they were going to go compete and work through that. All these stories, which is all about struggle. They're all about competition. Right? They are all about working harder. Excuse me, beating everybody else. And we, as a society, we are addicted to the competition. We are addicted to the drama. We are addicted to the struggle. Now, the competition plays a certain role in advancing things forward. It can. We were watching the track and field, and I don't know what distance the event was, but one of the commentators said, and there were several competitors in the race who had previously run the mile in 3 minutes and 47 seconds. And I stopped and looked at Lori and said, did I hear that right? Because I remember when they broke the 4-minute mile, when Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile in 1954. Up until that moment, people were saying it couldn't be done. It could not be done. There were physiologists writing papers about how the human body was just, it couldn't move that fast. The muscles couldn't move that fast. It couldn't be done. And when Bannister broke the 4-minute mile, within a month, other people started breaking the 4-minute mile. The competition got us there, got them there. They were struggling to be the best. They were struggling to compete. And they got there. But keep in mind that while they were getting there, there were those who were saying it can't be done. It can't be done. The Wright brothers were getting ready to fly their powered airplane. And people were writing papers that it was impossible for a heavier than air powered machine to fly. The English built the first steamship capable of crossing the ocean. And while it was crossing the ocean, people were writing papers about how it would not be possible for the ship to carry enough coal in order to power itself across the ocean. So competition can help us kind of break through some of those blocks, barriers, and boundaries that exist in human consciousness. But I want you to keep in mind that that is a human experience. Those blocks, barriers, and boundaries exist in human consciousness. So human consciousness has the barrier, and human consciousness believes that competition is the way to break through it. It's what's needed to break through it. And we become addicted to the competition. We become addicted to the struggle, and we've got to see it in everything. Everything in our society is set up as a struggle. Our entertainment is a drama which has excuse me, which has a protagonist who's trying to accomplish something, and the entire plot is taking them away from it. And then at the very end of the movie, usually in our culture, usually the protagonist wins. They overcome all obstacles. In other societies, it's not so. In other societies, the protagonist loses and everybody cries. And some filmmakers have actually had to shoot films with different endings. One ending for an American audience where everybody goes away happy, and one ending for another audience where everybody goes away in tears as a tragedy. But we're stuck in this idea that there has to be a struggle. There has to be a drama. There has to be something to compete against, something to fight against, and something to win. And what we need to do is we need to take a deep breath and step back from that and say, well, that's the human way of looking at things, right? Human consciousness believes that. And because human consciousness believes that, human consciousness recreates that over and over and over. If there's no need for struggle, we're not interested in it. Okay? We like gold because it's hard to dig. We're not interested in trying to sell beach sand. Yet all of our silicon chips are made out of sand. But you don't see people struggling for sand. It's too easy. Too easy doesn't get our attention. Has to be tough. Has to be tough. Result of that, of course, is that many times we create our own crises. We create our own struggles so that we then can have the exhilaration of fighting our way out of them, of winning, of competing in cases where there was no need, you know. In history, there are examples of nations that have gone to war when there was a peace offer on the table. If you look at the history of our country, you will find that that is so. We had gotten ourselves into a frenzy of going to war that when an alternative presented itself, we just rejected it and said, that can't be so, let's go to war. And we did. At other times, people said, it's not in our best interest to accept peace. I want you to think about that. It's not in our best interest to accept peace, so they went to war anyway. And these examples exist. They exist in our history. They exist in the history of the world. The belief in the need for the struggle was so great in the consciousness of the society that they went to war rather than to pursue the alternatives that were on the table. So what I'm getting to with all of this is that there comes a point in the development of human consciousness where the struggle, the need to win, the competition, and all of those things is like being inside the egg. It's like being inside the shell. This is the world inside the shell. And it's good as far as it goes in terms of helping us to grow stronger and helping us to move forward. But at some point, it holds us back. At some point, it limits our spiritual growth. And at some point, we have to step out of the struggle, out of the drama, out of the competition. We've got to get beyond being satisfied with winning or losing. Of course, if you lose, you have to come back to try to win again. And if you've won, you have to work harder to make sure that the losers coming back at you aren't going to beat you next time. We stay stuck in the struggle no matter what, you see. And we can't see what's beyond it. It's like the chick inside the egg. We can't see what's beyond that shell. We can't see where we're stuck. So at some point we have to take a deep breath and step back and say that is the experience that human consciousness has created. But I am a spiritual being. I am a part of that which always was and always will be. I am a part of that which we call God. And now we must stop and ask ourselves, well, does God struggle? Does God compete? Does God have to win? Does God have adversaries? And traditional theology in this part of the world will tell you yes. Yes, you see, God has enemies. God has the great adversary. See, God has the devil. The devil is always a thorn in God's side. And you have to stop back and take a minute to think about this. That which is omnipotent, all-powerful, how could it have an enemy? How could it have an adversary, an antagonist? How could it create something? How could it, being all-knowing, create something that was going to turn against it and then permit it to do so? And of course, the traditional explanation is well, God lets the tempter test all of us to see if we're worthy. And then we got to say, well, how could that which is all-knowing not know whether we would pass or fail the test? How could it create us out of itself, knowing that we would fail a test and it would punish us forever? So as we start to question these ideas, this whole concept of the need for God to struggle, the argument falls apart. What we come to realize is that humanity has created a God in its own image and likeness. So if we have an enemy, that enemy must be God's enemy. And we have to destroy that enemy, because in doing so, we are doing God's work. And after we destroy them, we're going to take all of their gold, and we're going to carry off their children into slavery and enjoy the spoils of war, because, well, God would want it that way. And if we look back through some of the books of ancient scriptures, they are full of violence. They are full of stories just like the one that I described. God giving people permission to go kill one another, to steal from one another, because they are not like us. They are not like us. That is the human consciousness of separateness and otherness that human beings are projecting into the divine. If we bring ourselves to coming to an understanding of what the divine is, it's perfect unity. It's perfect oneness. It's singularity. It cannot be against itself, and it's all powerful. Nothing can be against it. There can be no sense of struggle. There's nothing that needs to be known that it doesn't know. There is nothing that needs to be done that it cannot do. Omniscience and omnipotence. And it is everywhere in everyone. It is omnipresence. So as I mentioned last week, in the absolute, in the sense of the absolute, these ideas of struggle and separateness and conflict, they can't be. It can only be a temporary condition that exists in the human experience while we are in the shell, while we are incubating, while we are learning that what we truly are is spiritual beings. So if the divine doesn't occupy its time with the drama, with the struggle, with the competition as we human beings do. I just want you to stop and think for a minute. If you listen to the conversation during the day, at work or wherever you go, if you look at what's in the news, if you listen to what's on the radio, how much of it is consumed with competition and struggle and drama and winning? And I would venture in the high 90%. Right? And even every night when the news goes off, they always close with a touching human interest story to kind of try to bring us back from all of the drama that they have just taken us through in the last 30 minutes. And they try to bring us back with some touching human interest story. And usually it's about somebody who overcame a great obstacle or a great struggle. How much of life, of this precious life that we have, how much of this life is consumed in this human idea of the need for struggle, the need to compete, the need to win? What can we do if we recover all of that time that's being wasted? How do we spend it? Remember the movie The Princess Bride, and Mandy Patinkin played a character, and his whole purpose in life was he was going to hunt down the six-fingered man who killed his father, and he was going to kill him. Remember? He would say, my name is, it sounded like Ignacio Montoya or something like that. I don't know what it was. He would say, my name is, you killed my father. Prepare to die. So he would go about this whole movie. He was chasing this man down, and finally at the very end of the movie, he catches him and he has his revenge. And in the last 10, in our society, in the last 10 minutes of the movie, they wrap it up. They always have to wrap it up and set up the sequel. And one of his compadres says to him, well, what are you going to do now? And he says, I don't know. He says, I've been in the revenge business so long, I don't know how to do anything else. We have been in the competition and the struggle and the drama business for so long that we don't know how to do anything else. And now we have to really seriously address that. You and I, we have come to a point on our spiritual path where we are pecking open that shell. We are breaking out of the human experience. We are breaking out of that limited experience that we had that believed in the necessity of struggle and winning and all of those things. And now we are stepping into what is it really like to be a spiritual being? If the chick could think when it pushed open the shell, imagine what it would be saying. Wow, what is it like to be in the nest? And the first time it jumps off the edge of the nest. Wow, what is it like to fly? But they do it naturally. You see, they do it easily. They do it through instinct. And we are required to do it deliberately and consciously. So if we think for a minute then of a divine experience, of the experience of God, where there is no sense of struggle, there is no sense of competition, there is no idea of right doing or wrong doing, as Rumi says, there is just the isness of God, the I amness, as Moses might say, the suchness, as the Buddha would say. It just is. See, it just is. And as I said last week, it creates for joy. So its creation then is the experience of itself, the experience of unity, the experience of oneness in all things and everything. And we come to a realization that we have been created not to compete, not to struggle, not to win, but we have been created to collaborate. Our purpose in life as a spiritual being is to learn more, or to experience more of our spiritual nature. And since competing and winning and struggling and all of those things that our society is addicted to are not the spiritual experience, we have to let them go. We have to move beyond them. So now what we have to learn is that if we want a different experience in life, if there's something different that we choose to have, we don't have to fight our way to it. We don't have to struggle our way to it. We don't have to take it from another. We don't have to compete harder in order to win. But what we need to do is to collaborate with the creative process of the universe. We have to let the sense of ego and intellect fade into the background, and we have to recognize that there is a power that will do it that we have not created and we could not create. And what our part is to collaborate by providing the mental equivalent as Emmett Fox would say. We have to see it, we have to feel it, we have to believe it. We have to recognize then that the good that we desire in life, whatever that good is some expression of God. So we think, well, gee, I'd love to have more money. I'd love to have a greater income in my life. We can work in secondary causation. We can think, well, and I need to get a promotion, and in order to get a promotion, I've got to compete against so-and-so over here, and I've got to get that raise. Or we can take ourselves back and say, what is this supply in our life? What is money in our life? Other than a tangible form of the supply of God appearing in our lives. And if I can bring myself into a deeper experience of the presence of God, if I can bring myself into a deeper belief that just as everything that little eagle needed in its progression, that everything that is needed for me has been provided, then I can accept it, and it can appear in my life in whatever way as may be appropriate. Joel Goldsmith, in his book Spiritual Supply, tells of a time in his life when he was a very successful practitioner in terms of healing. People would come to him with illnesses, and he would do treatment work with them, and they would be healed. And he knew that there was a power in the universe that responded to him exactly according to his belief. And he moved to a different city, and he suddenly found himself not having enough money to pay for his housing and his family's housing and his family's food. And he said, well, how can this be? There's a power in the universe that responds to us exactly according to our belief. I know it works. I've seen it produce healings. What's going on? And he said he came to a realization that he probably did not have a proper understanding of what God is. And he decided that if he would devote his spiritual practice to a deeper understanding of the presence of God, then that would take care, that issue that he was having with his finances would straighten itself out. This is a totally different approach than what we would see in our human mindset. Or in our human mindset, we would say, well, I need to go to school, I need to get another degree, I need to get a different job, this. I need to do something, I need to compete, I need to win, I need to struggle. And Goldsmith's struggle, if you want to call it that, was a different one, see. He struggled with the old ideas, the limiting beliefs that were holding him back. In his work on mythology, Joseph Campbell talks about an image that if you study anything about the Hindu theology and scriptures, there's an image of a goddess of destruction, Kali. Kali was the goddess of destruction. And there's an image that's very, very popular. And Kali is, for all practical purposes, from our point of view in our culture, we would look at Kali and we would think that she's a cannibal or a headhunter. Kali is dressed, and she's in a grass skirt, and the grass skirt has got a belt around it, and the belt has all these human skulls hanging on it. And she's dancing around a fire, and it's very terrifying, you know. And we would look at that from our culture and say, well, what is that? You know, what is that all about? That's kind of odd, isn't that kind of superstitious? What is that? But Campbell explains the symbolism to us. And what he says is that we spend the first part of our life struggling with things out there, right? The externals. The Buddhists would tell us grasping and aversion. We're trying to get something, we're trying to get away from something. We're grasping, we're averting. We're fighting everything out there. Our view is that it is the world out there that we need to somehow control and manipulate. And once we get it where we want it, by God, we're going to be okay. The symbolism of the first three chakras, we have to struggle to survive. Then we want to expand and reproduce, make more of ourselves, make more of our country, make more of our business. We can be more powerful if we do that. And the third chakra, we want to have our willpower exerted. We want to be in charge. Maslow came along later and took those and put them into the hierarchy of needs. And he said that we have to go through those phases, but eventually we get to the point of self-actualization. And what Campbell is telling us then is that what this symbol, the symbology of Kali dancing with the skulls on her belt, what it is representing to us is that just as fiercely as we would go out into the world to compete and to struggle and to win and to strive and to prevail, that there comes a point in our spiritual growth where we realize that we have to turn that energy inward to dissolve the false beliefs that we have that have been holding us back. And this was Goldsmith's point. He could have gone out and approached his issue of supply in a human way by working harder. But he chose to recognize that he was a spiritual being, and that if there was any blockage at all, it wasn't in God's domain, it was in his consciousness. And that when he came to realize that God cannot withhold, God has already given the gifts, and he came to truly understand a different understanding of God and a different understanding of his relationship to God. The supply straightened itself out. I would say then what we want to do is we want to use that as an example of saying, from this day forward, I'm not going to struggle in the external world to work harder, to win more, to compete, to be caught up in the drama. But from this day forward, I will collaborate. I will collaborate with that power that has created me out of itself. I will learn how to get along with it. I will learn how to go within and to eagerly dissolve those false ideas that have been holding me back. And this idea that competition brings out the best is a false idea that is holding us back. So competition can bring out better. Roger Bannister ran the 4-minute mile, and now they're running 3-minute and 47-second miles. If you want to consider that better, it brought out better. The collaboration will bring out the best. So the world has struggled long enough in this belief of the necessity of struggle, the necessity of competition, the necessity of war, the necessity of winning and losing, and all of that is based on a false idea that the pie is of a limited size, and in order for me to get the piece big enough that I want, I have to take it away from somebody else. Think about it. Go down to all your underlying beliefs that are behind these wars, that are behind all of the things that we're doing, and we are all trying to out-manipulate one another to get more of what we believe to be a limited pie, a limited amount. And what if we truly believe that God is unlimited, infinite? And what if we truly believe that we are one with that infinite nature of God? I know I've used this example before, but it seems so silly to me that I think it makes the point. The earth has gold buried in very hard to reach places, and it's there. But we don't consider ourselves rich because there's gold in the earth. But if we send somebody out to dig it up, and they work very, very hard at it, and we melt it down, and we put it in gold bars, and we send it to Fort Knox, where we put it in a different hole in the earth, we consider ourselves rich. The gold doesn't care. It's still in the earth. It's in a different form, in a different shape. The idea that suddenly we are rich because we've done that is a human agreement. It is a limitation of human consciousness. And where does the gold come from? It is the very stuff and substance of the universe. It is the energy of God taking form. And someday this will all go back into the energy and start all over again. So if we recognize then that we can step beyond the human idea, the human limitation, the human consciousness, and we can get in touch with the invisible supply, the infinite, the presence and the activity of God is what sustains us, then we can start to have a different experience. So what I invite everyone to do this week, take some time this week to observe. Take some time this week to observe. And what you're observing is you're observing those around you, and you are observing your own self, right? And primarily yourself, because what you're seeing out there is a reflection of what's important to you in here. There's so much going on out there that we can't take it all in, so we take in that which we're already attuned to. How much of what we observe, how much of what we participate in is the drama and the struggle and the competition and the winning and the losing? I mean, the campaign is a perfect example of that. Every day the headlines are about who's up in the polls, who's down in the polls, who's winning this state, who's losing that state. All the different factions that want something out of the political process. Are they winning or are they losing? Just be aware of how much of your life, your consciousness, is being consumed with an idea that does not even exist in the mind of God. Now, it is time for us to crack open the egg. It is time for us to put the shell aside. And it's time for us to step into our spiritual nature and say, I'm just not going to do it the old way anymore. I'm not going to get caught up in the struggle anymore. I'm not going to get caught up in the fear anymore. I'm not going to get caught up in the drama anymore. Whatever is going on, there's a solution in the divine mind, because the problem doesn't exist in the divine mind. What I do now is I collaborate with God. I attune my consciousness to the consciousness of God. I see God where I used to see struggle. I see love where I used to see hate. I see hope where I used to see doubt. Remember the prayer of St. Francis, O Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there's hatred, let me sow love. That is what we're here for. That is where we have arrived in the evolution of our personal consciousness. We have arrived at a point where we are ready to let go of the race consciousness belief in the need of competition, of winning, of struggle, and of drama. And we are ready to try something totally new. The experience of peace, the experience of love, the experience of God, the experience of trust. We weren't created to get more, to have more, to win more, to go faster. We were created to know God. We need to stop looking for God where God is not. God's not in the struggle. God's in the peace. Let's collaborate and go there together. And so it is.